Welcome to selfdiscoverymedia.com, where the orchard of wisdom shows are at your fingertips. It ignites your soul, your heart, your spirit, your mind, and your body with illumination from people who have made the journey before you. They're here now to help you on your journey, on your path of self-discovery. We are funded by you, the audience, and the people we interview. If you wish to support us, please go to selfdiscoverymedia.com and press on our Fund Action button. Anything is appreciated. We'd like you to sit back and enjoy the shows. Here we go. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Mental Health Awareness right here on selfdiscoverymedia.com. I'm your host, Sarah Troy. My wonderful guest is Dr. Amelia Kelley. We're talking about abuse today, thriving after an abusive relationship. She's a trauma-informed psychotherapist who empowers survivors to thrive after an abusive relationship. It is said that 1 in 3 women have been abused by their intimate partner in their lifetime. This is according to the United States Center for Disease Control and Prevention. However, emotional abuse is most equal for both genders, with close to half of both having experienced at least one form of psychological aggression in an intimate partner, which can include gaslighting, cohesive control, being insulted, humiliated, or acted upon in a dangerous manner. In addition, COVID-19 exacerbated alarming statistics regarding domestic violence and abuse in the US. Now, that's just in the US, never mind worldwide. When you are a survivor of domestic violence or in a relationship wrought with intimidation, gaslighting, or control of any kind, it's time to regain the part of yourself that you may have lost and find your support network in regaining living a true, authentic life. In What I Think I Knew, or what I Wish I Knew, Surviving and Thriving After an Abusive Relationship, written by co-author Dr. Amelia Kelley, survivor Kendall Ann Combs, and the authors of The U.S. Journey, Mrs. Combs' tragic relationship experience, along with Dr. Kelley's trauma-informed psychotherapist techniques and real strategies to support women and men who have had an experienced and a toxic, unhealthy, abusive relationship. Dr. Kelley's whole health approach to healing and self-care is critical for those suffering from violence or other forms of relationship abuse. She shares eye-opening antidotes, cutting-edge research, facts, intimate wisdom, and much more needed in this gripping guide. Oh boy, does it need right now the intimidation, the stress level, the anxiety, all of it's been heightened over the last couple of years, and it will always come out. It's why do you hurt your loved ones? But that is where people lash out, isn't it? Because those are the closest people to them. They very often would not do it to a boss or to a friend or to anybody else, but they do it to their loved one. Why do we see this so prevalent in attacking a loved one who's meant to be your support, the person that is your partner? Welcome to the show, love.
Oh, thank you for having me. To answer your question, I think that's a wonderful observation. Our loved ones are the ones that really see the more vulnerable sides of us, if we're willing to let them. And so when someone who is perhaps a narcissist is in a scenario where they are not receiving that positive mirror image all that time, then it can be painful and unbearable for them. And so they will lash out and they will take it out on their close people. There's a little saying when it comes to therapy, if you're working with children, and it's, you want to be concerned if the child is acting out at home versus, acting out in public versus at home. Like, you want to know that they feel safe enough to express themselves and to be imperfect. And so that same kind of idea applies to adult romantic relationships. And so people want to wear their best veneer and their best personalities, bring their representative, if you will, to outside things like you mentioned, work, school, bosses, things like that. So,
and numerous shows, and of course I think narcissism has definitely been on the rise. Narcissism is very much the lack of teaching empathy to our children, kindness, caring, empathy, considering other people's emotions. It's still very much in that kind of babyhood of me, myself, I'm hungry, I'm this, I need adoration. And they don't get to a point of giving that adoration to others, etc. And so they grow up with it's all about them. And unless you are doing something for them, you're doing it against them. And they're going to lash out. Right? They're going to take it out, and it's never their fault. Never.
Right. Well, I love that you mentioned childhood, because that's actually when we're supposed to be narcissists. I mean,
Yes.
a young baby, for instance, should be narcissistic in order to get fed and in order to survive. When the child's needs are not met, whether it be through emotional neglect, abuse, or other adverse childhood experiences, there's this shift where they're not able to get their needs met appropriately. So they're going to continue tapping back into what worked best.
Right. Yes.
And the problem is when that perpetuates into adulthood, so we can all have a bit of narcissism in us. I was fixing my hair before we started.
That's just, self-worth and the way you wish to present yourself. I don't consider that narcissistic, because it's not at the expense of someone else.
True. Well, and that's when it's disordered. That's when it becomes a disorder. So I think that's why it's become such a buzzword. It's almost a bit of a misunderstanding of what is healthy narcissism, caring about yourself, and what is disordered narcissism, which is when you're doing it at the expense of someone else's well-being. Yeah.
And this is, when we look at, if somebody's been physically abused, then you can see it. The bruising, the this and that is there. There's evidence. When somebody's been emotionally abused, it's like, what are you talking about? Because generally the abusers are absolutely charming.
Oh, well, they have to be in order to lure their, I hate to use the word victims, but to lure their victims in.
Yes.
They have to be charming. There has to be something sustaining the interest.
And also to keep staying there, or, marrying them in the first place. It's like, it was just a misunderstanding. He's fine now. And then, those type of things escalate and escalate. And then they always come back and make you feel, and to a point, you just never feel safe again. But to everyone else, they're utterly charming. So nobody knows what you're talking about when you try and talk to someone about what they're doing.
Well, I think it is important to explore the need to be open and to express and to share on a regular basis, because I think that can happen if someone is manipulated for long enough and gaslit, which I'm sure we'll talk about, for long enough, then they're going to feel like, well, no one's going to believe me. No one's going to take me serious. And I've seen this play out with countless clients that I work with, who I might be the very first person that they've spoken to who believes their whole story.
Right. Yeah.
And that's really hard. That can really trap someone in an abusive relationship.
It's isolating. It doesn't matter if they're out in a crowd, it's isolating. Totally. I also think that they take it on that it must be their fault. How come they can be charming to everyone else, but not to you? So you must be doing something wrong. And so one takes on the burden that it's all your fault, because that's what they've convinced you.
And, to go back to your original statement about how can someone walk through life and have that positive veneer at work and school, and even sometimes with extended family that don't have as much contact with them, it's for that very reason. That person needs and thrives off of that positive feedback loop from everyone. And so it sets up this double-edged sword. On one hand, they're getting their narcissistic supply from places and not from you. So they're going to berate you and blame you. But then again, you're seeing that skewed version of, why am I the only one? Am I crazy for thinking that?
Yeah. And it's really hard to kind of tell people what's going on, because they choose very often not to believe you. It's not that they don't want to believe you. It's just they don't see it. They just see a charming couple. Right. So behind the closed doors, or all those other little things that are going on, they don't very often want to know. If it's a real physical abuse, they have to pay attention to it. But when it's an emotional abuse, it's kind of almost la, 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 la. I don't know how to deal with it, so therefore I don't want to know.
I think that's been our state up until recently. I do think there is a war cry, if you will,
Good.
to bring up the importance of knowing about emotional abuse. Even research has been supporting this. There are scans done of individuals who experience physical pain and brain scans versus emotional pain or the pain of a separation, and the same area of the brain fires.
Right. Right. So abuse is abuse, whether it's physical or emotional, right?
Abuse is abuse. And sometimes when you cannot create a full narrative around it, when it's not, I did this, they hurt me physically, that's abuse. It can be harder to understand when it's insidious and when it's complex and when it just perpetuates.
Yeah.
So I do think there is a shift. You know, I definitely wouldn't want to discourage listeners from sharing what they're experiencing and from finding someone that they know who is willing to be vulnerable themselves, usually is a good place to start. Someone who is living bravely, as Brene Brown says, and is willing to, you know, have the hard conversations. So maybe not speaking to someone who you're really seeking their approval, that might not be the best resource or the best safe person, but that's also the benefit of why people seek out a third party in, say, a therapist, for instance, someone who's more objective.
Well, yeah, because you know, if you go to your mother, so to speak, then it will be, why did you marry him? I always knew he was no good. That doesn't help the situation, you know.
And sometimes people fear, and this actually came up in Kendall Ann's story, sometimes people fear the what if. Like, what if I tell what's going on to my loved one? And then what if we decide to repair and then now they hate them?
Right.
And so that can be this fear that people have about being authentic and open.
Right. I'm not sure, I'm not convinced that if you're in a narcissistic relationship, and of course there's so many different degrees of narcissism too as well, but you know, if you're in a narcissistic relationship, that it can be repaired, because what I know of narcissists firsthand is the inaccountability. It's not my fault, I didn't do it. And they might make a statement kind of once, yeah, it was my fault, I shouldn't have married you. I'm not marriage material. And that is kind of the apology. But it's still not the ownership of what or the accountability. But whereas other people who are going through emotional stress because they've lost their job or they have past traumas in their life, they've lashed out, you know, it's kind of, they don't know where else to go and they got to explode and they feel they're safe with their spouse. And that I feel can be repaired, you know, with the right therapy. But do you agree or disagree as a psychotherapist?
Well, I think you bring up a good point with the fact that narcissism, for instance, is different than other, as we would call, mental health disorders. Even the classic way of diagnosing, they were on a completely different axis, which we don't use anymore because psychology is always changing. But so you cannot medicate narcissism. You cannot, it's not necessarily from a chemical imbalance. It's not hereditary. And that's a tricky one because you almost would think it's hereditary, but it's normally because of nurture, not nature, if you will.
Or lack of nurture.
Exactly, lack of nurture. I mean, a lot of times you're going to have someone who experiences trauma or neglect are going to fall into a narcissistic route to protect themselves, or more of a fear of abandonment, which narcissists actually do fear abandonment, but a bit more of what someone might label kind of like a borderline risk-taking behaviors, unsafe space, unsafe behaviors towards the self, and kind of making themselves the one that you punish. Those can be two different routes that someone might take if they don't get their needs met early on in life. But to speak to whether or not it can be fixed, most people don't come into my doors because they're a narcissist. They don't come in and say, I'm here because I'm a narcissist. They will come for other things, you know, other mental illnesses, trauma, substance abuse, and through the work they do, they might discover the narcissistic traits with the help of a compassionate therapist. And I think if there is a willingness to work on the behaviors, there's a slim
Yes.
number of folks that can make some changes with that.
For them to walk through your door for anything is already a good step,
Exactly.
right? Because
Exactly.
they're not ones to kind of, I mean, I would say to my spouse, let's go and get some help. If I'm not enough and I can't see it, let's go and get some objective help. And it was always a no, because it didn't want to be revealed, or again, the accountability. You go, not me. I've got to go get fixed.
That's a very common thing. Actually, oh my goodness, I had this couple I was working with, and the husband was absolutely a narcissist, and lots of emotional abuse going on for a long period of time. And when the light started to shine at him a little bit, we were doing couples work. And he actually agreed to come in. When the light started to shine on him a little bit, he was adamant that she had to get a full psych eval because it was all her fault, and it was because she was unstable.
Right.
And he would not let it go. I mean,
right.
just persistently refocusing it on her. So that is definitely not uncommon. One thing I will say that I do find helps the situation is to stop focusing on the narcissist changing and focus on the other person changing by speaking up for themselves, emotionally individuating, not taking no for an answer. And sometimes I've had couples who will not separate despite the fact that I might, as a therapist, think it would be the healthiest choice. And the only thing that offers long-term wellness at all is for the non-narcissist to make almost like a separate life, separate friends, other things. But a really controlling, abusive person is not always going to permit that. So that's why it's an up mountain battle, not even just uphill, up mountain.
Yeah, I think it's, in my case, when I stepped in my own empowerment, when I stepped into my own self-value, when I started my own self-discovery, of no longer, seeing myself through his eyes, and seeing that there was more to me and willing to do that work. And then when the argument would come up, I would say, please take that up with your mirror. That's the only one that's interested.
Ooh, I like that. I might feel that.
And that was to, reflect back that I'm not going to, even though he may follow me from room to room to room to try and get the rise, because that's what he used to do until, he went for the juggler until you were a mess in the corner. And it was, I'm standing up. I'm not interested. No, I am not taking it on.
Yes.
You can take that elsewhere. And it was then, I asked for the divorce. But I knew that I had to be very, very careful how I did all of this. It was a great deal of seeding, watering, seeding, watering. And in asking for the divorce, he didn't leave the house for 2 years, even though he had somebody in his life. And eventually I could say to him, we're not getting back together. Yeah, no, I've moved on. But it had to be his choice. So plant the seeds, water, plant the seeds, water. You want somebody else in your life. You want to go. You want the divorce. You want that. Keep watering it until it became his idea.
Yeah.
Right. And because there was no point. You just had to be a little more psychological clever, because, it was for me to say, I want a divorce. Give it to me now. That was no. That was caused an uproar. But it was okay. We're going to live separately in the house and we'll see how it goes.
Oh, I've seen that happen a lot of times.
And then, at the 2-year mark, I think it's time to move on. And then he wanted to move on because his life wasn't at home anyway. Right. But it was his choice, Yeah, I agree. I'm going to go. But it was gently as you go, because the one thing with narcissists I find is do not ever attack their ego.
Kryptonite.
And the response that you're going to get back from that is not one that you want.
I do think and hope that is, as people become more educated and really can identify that they're experiencing narcissistic abuse and that they're experiencing forms of power control, that by having outside support, the hope is that they don't have to seed and water for 2 years.
Exactly. I had nowhere else to go. It was a solo thing. So I don't recommend it.
No, I don't know if you heard me say that. Must have been incredibly draining.
It was, yes. And actual fact, through the last few years, I did develop fibromyalgia. And
that chronic
and
pain and chronic
yeah,
stress.
just, you know, it was just the suppression of the pain all the time that eventually manifested in disease.
Yes.
And, you know, the body couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah.
Right. You know, the ownership I had to have is that I actually gave him the boots to kick me with, because I allowed that behavior, because I felt so little of myself. It's only as my own self-value went up, as I rediscovered who I was and that I had a right to be who I was,
Right.
that those boots could no longer reach me. But initially, I kind of had in those boots. And I don't think we realize in an abusive relationship that by not standing up for ourselves, we're almost condoning the abuse.
It can become an enabling cycle.
Yeah.
And that is actually why, to reference the book, we have the first half is surviving, and it's how do you recognize what's happening and get yourself out safely, and then the entire second half of the book is on thriving, because it's so much less likely that you'll be hoovered back into a relationship the more empowered you are. And so it's not always just the initial leaving that can be so difficult. It can also be, how do I stay out?
Yes. Oh yeah, because you see this over and over again, don't you? Well, we're giving it another try. And, you know, and then we see on the news, body found. You know, it's like, if it's wrong, it's wrong. You know, don't get sucked back in out of guilt, especially when there's children involved. Right.
That adds a whole nother element to it as well.
Yeah. And that's where, you know, definitely have to reach out to other support, because it's very hard to do it on your own and with the children, and also still being that strong face for your children when your knees are shaking. And it's very, you know, it's, if you haven't got family around you, find those friends around you that are going to be supportive, because you definitely need support during that transaction of leaving.
And that's something to consider too when it comes to friendships. Is it's not uncommon that when you have to break contact, you may find a shift in relationships. Like you may not always keep those same friendships you had before, because they may be part of that life, and that can be a hard mourning process for people. But it's very normal and very typical that happens. But the relationships that are born out of that after end up most often end up being so much more enriching.
Right. Yeah. You know, the Don Ru's thing, the 4 agreements: speak your word with integrity, don't assume, ask, right? And don't take things personally. So somebody is dumping on you or reflecting back on you, it's their issue. That, you know, just don't take it personally. And obviously simply just do your best, measured by you, not by anyone else. You know, 4 great things, but certainly don't assume, folks. You have no idea what this person is going through. Ask. And if you're asking because you care. Maybe just want to be a sounding board. You may want to give advice. You may want to give support, but ask because you care. Right. And please do not go and dump your stuff on other people if they're not ready to receive it. You know, it's when
talking about safe people to share this with. Right. And I think that's the other thing too. Like if someone is adamantly supporting the abuser, then that's generally going to be a sign that that person doesn't have the ability to stand up to that person themselves. So how are they going to empower you?
Yes, that's true. That's very, very true. So what is a gaslighter?
Well, gaslighting happens most often after the beginning of a relationship, where there's the love bombing phase we call, where you're just inundated with adoration, gestures. As Chris Rock had said in one of his comedy acts, you bring your best representative to the relationship. And so once that phase starts to dwindle off, because it will, I mean, some people call it the honeymoon phase, but really it's what happens when life gets stressful, and how do couples show up for each other. When that happens, what appears is that mirror image of the other person seeing us as perfect starts to fade. And we have to show up as our vulnerable selves. Well, someone who is abusive is going to struggle when that happens. And that shift can happen because of the introduction of children. I will put this out there. Children will not fix a narcissist. They will aggravate their symptoms.
Yes.
Aggravate their behaviors. They will make their behaviors worse. The narcissist will be more vehement after the
They
introduction.
they will compete with the attention.
Exactly. So, and that can look different for all relationships, but so at that point, when the person is feeling threatened, whether their ego strength is threatened or this narcissistic supply is starting to tap out, they are going to start blaming you for their pain. They're going to blame you for all the different arguments. They're going to make you question your reality, question whether or not your feelings are valid. So they will invalidate your feelings. They will pit others against you, even if those people don't even know they're doing it. So they might say, hey, your mom thinks you're crazy, or, no one wants to be your friend, or what. Those are all forms of gaslighting. And if you feel like when you do come to your partner with a concern and they will never take responsibility, and they will somehow always wittingly turn it back on you, that is a form of gaslighting. And it can be very dangerous because it starts to slowly erode your self-worth and your ego strengths, so that you are more likely to give the boot. So, and you were saying giving the boot to be kicked with.
Yeah.
Most people are not going to enter a relationship and initially say, here's the boot, kick me.
Yeah.
It's going to happen after a period of gaslighting, essentially.
Yeah, I didn't actually know it was called gaslighting. I just thought that was all in the narcissistic package, but yeah, and it's interesting.
It was actually first coined, I want to say, in the 60s or something. It's from a movie. And the character was gaslighting in the movie. And so then it became part of, pop psychology terminology, and has been researched and has, I joke it's the new kale of psychology. Kale used to be a garnish on the plate. Now it's like
right, the life-saving greenery. Yes. No, it's interesting. I mean, because I thought gaslighting is when somebody, when you're out on a date and they're not picking up the call, or they're not answering the tweets, or they're not coming back at you. I thought that was gaslighting. So am I getting mixed up with something else?
I think that's ghosting.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. I'm showing my age here.
No, I mean, there's terms that I do not know.
I know. It's like, when LOL came out, and what the hell is that? Laugh out loud. It's just, my age is showing that.
I do like FOMO, though, because I feel like I have FOMO quite often.
And that is? No.
Fear of missing out.
Oh, right. That is a good one. I'm
the FOMO queen.
I would say that I was perhaps at one stage in my life, and I think that was especially when I was not feeling enough. What am I missing out on? Because what is missing in me? So
I can see that. But I'm going to do some journaling after
this. We all can thrive, right? And very recently, a few months ago, there was a conversation with my ex and my children, because we were all there. We walked our daughter down the aisle together. It's been 21 years, since we were together. We were having a birthday party where my kids had bought a holiday home, and we were all there. And my son decided just to direct him. Why can't you say you love us, and why can't you show it? Why do you not pay attention
to their father?
That's to their father. And I was there. And so, and he came out with a few things that happened to him in his life. And he was not brought up to love. He was brought up to hide things. He was brought up that only strength was that weakness or vulnerability, was not. And so he's always believed that, the strength, the force. I think I taught him how to love with his children, especially his first daughter. When he would walk down the pathway from the car, I would put her on the ground, ready to crawl to him the moment you opened up the door. Aww. And he learned he became a big playmate with the kids, just learned how to love them beautifully until they were teens and they had an opinion of their own.
Well, and isn't that interesting? It's kind of like you just described the inception of a romantic relationship where in the beginning, dad has no faults. They see him as this like really wonderful playmate. And then when they start saying, actually, you do have a couple faults, that's when it can start to.
Yeah.
And, you just said something that I think circles back to what we were talking about before about, is there hope?
Yeah.
So I think one of the biggest things is you're not going to see this incredible shift in how they see the world and how they function. However, at some point, and a lot of times it's time, it's age, it's wisdom, it's experiences, there will be at least a level of awareness of
Yes.
what they're doing. And that doesn't happen for all of them.
Yep. No, it took him 21 years, because that's actually at that party.
Right.
He said, I think I was a good father, because in his mind he thought he was. But I know I was a lousy husband.
Okay, well, that's huge.
I know that was huge, believe me. Yeah. All of the kids raised their eyebrows. You were admitting it? Because it was my kids that told me to divorce him. So it was that bad.
Yeah, that happens quite often. There are
Yeah.
a lot of times where the relationship is being held together because there's a belief that the children need it. And the children are the ones who are, you know, signaling and throwing the white flag and saying, can we please not watch you hurt each other
Yeah,
anymore?
exactly. And I think we're long past the stay together for the children. You know, we can be friends, we can see each other, we can do things, and it's just, he's the father of my children. There's no other relationship. There's Curtis, as I said, we both walked our daughter down the aisle. Because she didn't like the symbol of a man walking her down there and giving her away like a slave. So it was mother and father, you know, exchanging, you know.
I like it.
So, and you know, we're fine. We're very civil with each other, right? Because that was 21 years ago, and you need to get over it. Now, has it scarred me? I will admit it has. Has it made me very tentative in other relationships? Yes, it has. But I'm a firm believer, and I had last week a beautiful show on love. Love is not a one-day thing, you know, 14th of February. It's an everyday thing. And love is being able to like the person you love. You're not always going to like what they do or maybe what they say, but you want to like them. You want a friend in that. And that love is on so many levels. As you said, the honeymoon period, or that wonderful initial period. Can you settle down into wanting to go home to this person because they're your best friend, because you really love what your relationship is? And, you know, it's not all about the twinkle, twinkle, little star. And then when you go through the hard times, that love and respect for each other is there. But you don't find that love in that kind of partnership until you find that love in yourself.
I agree. Well, because you do need to know what it is that you want and deserve. Absolutely. And also, if you're walking around feeling bad about yourself or bitter or low, it is also hard to meet someone at a
higher vibration, right?
Higher vibration. And to just say something about what you had endured and where you are, I think, you know, you were saying as far as scarring, I think you've managed, and I'm just making this assumption with the wonderful work you're doing on your podcast, is the fact that you've taken your experience and you've integrated it so that you're more aware of what to look for in relationships and what not to. And you're taking what you've done and you've created a message out of it and a way to help people. So there is certainly a way to heal on this incredible level after. And it's not going to have to be a podcast for everyone.
No,
you know, like it can
but
be.
In that, I think we can all end up helping somebody through some way. You know, for me, through the podcast, yes, I do often refer to myself when it comes to this, because I know this story. This is what I can really speak authenticity from it. And I'm not speaking it to throw blame or shame his way, because he's a troubled man who, you know, has not been willing to work through those problems. That's his journey. I had to take ownership over my journey. Right. And that's the message, really, what we're looking for anybody that's going through abuse or has been through abuse, is that you can take back your life. You can thrive. You can live life on your own terms. And you don't have to become bitter or twisted about it. You become more cautious. You're going to look for things in a different way. But it is about, I think, if you can get to the stage where you're very happily living with yourself and you don't need anyone in your life, you may want someone, somebody to complement you, not complete you. You are happy with yourself, but there is no shame or blame here, because everybody has a story as to why they are the way they are. And he was a family of 8 kids, and the mother very narcissistic and very much needed the attention. And so there
Mhm.
wasn't that nurturing put on. And so if he didn't have it, how does he know how to give it?
True. And you bring up something that's important too about what happens when you do, as usually an empath or a highly sensitive person or someone who has a lot of ability to empathize can be a little bit susceptible to the claws of a narcissist because of the fact that you're able to reflect on why he maybe did what
Yes.
he did.
Yes.
So it's very important to understand that there's a difference between being empathetic and understanding and taking on the complete caretaker role at the expense of your own well-being.
Yes. Please don't do the second.
Yes, don't do the second. Don't do the
I
second.
mean, we're always in a partnership. You want to be able to help each other grow, or you
Right,
want to nurture and be caring for each other. But you don't want to have to fix someone, because that's not your job to do. You can enable them to fix themselves,
right.
encourage them and be supportive. But the
Right.
moment you become that person that's there to heal and fix them in a relationship, they get to a point where they then resent you because
Right.
they've moved on to a higher level and you're a reminder of where they were.
And most people won't change if you're the one trying to do the work for them.
Exactly. And that goes for us, the abuser, right? We, nobody's going to accept, as on the level that we want to be accepted as until we do the work ourselves.
Right, exactly. Well, I think that another thing that's really wonderful to think about with all of this too is the fact that that empowerment piece, bringing it back to when you have self-love, really it's a matter of knowing what you do and don't want and having those expectations. That's not always taught early on. So I do
Right.
encourage people to do something fun like a wish list or a set of intentions, things that you want to look out for and things that you require or would like to have in a relationship. You have a right to do that. You have a right
Yes.
to have those standards.
Yes.
So
Yes, we've all got desires and things that we wish to achieve in life. And it's, oh, I've fallen in love and he doesn't want me to do that. Oh, no, he wants to do something different. Those are warning signs right there, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If they're not encouraging you to have your own individual identity, that is a risk. That's something to look out for. Absolutely. We can't look to the other person to fill our cup and to make us feel good about ourselves. We can enhance each other, but we certainly can't look to the other and say, you're the reason I don't feel good about myself.
Right. So in the writing of this book,
Mm-hmm.
what I wish I knew, which, it's always hindsight is 2020, isn't it? We all wish we'd known that. But what we know with what we know at the time we know it, and that's going to be the reaction. That's what we're going to do with that knowledge.
Sure.
So if
Sure.
we can share knowledge for people to have that in their backpack when they're going through life, instead of having to wait to find out it was the wrong move, then great. So you've written this book with Kendall Ann Combs, and then this is because it's her story of her experience, and then you as a psychotherapist are kind of sharing the story, the ins and outs of it, how to go through the struggle and how to step into the thriving.
It's a very interesting dynamic, I think, that we took, because it wasn't just her survivor story and my self-help recommendations. It was, here's her story. This is how you can see that someone might get into a situation like this. This is how it evolved. This is how she got out. And this is how she tried to survive and thrive after. And so each and every chapter, it's her telling the story at the first half of the chapter. And then I'm following up with, this is what was happening. Here's the recommendations. Here's the research. Here's some skills you can try. And at the end of the chapter, she responds to the reader, now this is what I know based on what Dr. Kelley shared. Right. And then we have a journaling prompt for the reader every single chapter to reflect on what they know now. Because our hope is that, as you said, we do what we do when we know what we know. But we're hoping we can bypass it a little bit for some people and help them know.
The potholes, not the Grand Canyon.
Yes. We hope that they can know more earlier on. So that they don't have to go through the harrowing experience she did.
Right. And, we don't want you to go out there with, with a shield and a sword. That is not the way to go through life. But it's to go out really being aware of the signs. You know,
Mhm.
the signs are always there. It's like you look back and why didn't I see that? You know, the sign was there. I just didn't pay attention. And we're
Mhm.
in a very saturated world. We have a lot of dictation of how we should live life and a lot of expectation of who we should be.
Right.
And I think before you go into any relationship on any level, and I'm, you know, work level, romance level, motherhood level, fatherhood
Right.
level, you've really got to know who you are. So you've got to be willing to take that journey. And so
Mhm.
many people are carrying past traumas with them, past dramas with them. And
Right.
it plays out in a relationship because it needs somewhere to go. So
Absolutely.
we owe it to ourselves really to kind of do, maybe have the psychotherapy before we even look to going into a relationship. So we
Mhm.
know who we are, what we
Mhm.
stand for, what our tendencies are, what we need to still work on, where our strengths are, and we know what to bring to the table and what to look for in somebody else, through somebody else.
Right. And really getting back to the word friendship, that's having a friendship with yourself.
Yes, yes. If you don't like you, who else is going to like you?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Um, you know, it used to be the picket fence and you know, people in the village all getting together and supporting each other, you know,
Mhm.
and being able to have that chat and really be open
Yeah.
and honest. And then it kind of became, I'm not quite sure when, almost the stigma to talk about it. You know, nobody wants to know. Keep your drama. You're just a drama queen. And then people felt shut down and they
Mhm.
couldn't talk about it, or it became a stigma. I'm not strong enough. There's something wrong with me. How
Mhm.
come, you know, they don't want to know because then they'll think I'm weak or I'm
Mhm.
stupid or I'm this or that. And we've
Mhm.
put so much emphasis on other people's opinion that we've forgotten how to listen to each other.
Too much. Comparison
Ah,
is
deadly,
killer,
deadly. Yeah.
killer of joy. And the one good thing, there's a couple good things that have come out of COVID, and I think out of this pandemic. And one thing that I think is the normalizing of mental health.
Yeah.
It's the influx
Mm,
of people who are reaching out for help right now is astounding, and it is monumental, and it's amazing. And so it's becoming slowly but surely, just like I was saying, the battle cry for talking
mhm.
about emotional abuse, the normalizing of mental health and the fact that it is as important as physical health and it's one and the same. I think it is becoming more of a conversation, and it should continue to grow in that way and be a conversation.
In every other industry, we look for a balance, the
Mhm.
balancing of the books, the balancing of, you know, stock market, balancing of this and that. When things go off kilter, you know,
Mhm.
there is a detriment.
Right.
That applies to our lives. It applies
Mhm.
to our psyches. And
Right.
anytime something throws us off kilter, it
Mhm.
becomes something hard to manage. And if we don't have the tools of knowing how to manage it, it can get the better of us. It can cause that dis-ease, which can create
Right.
diseases.
Right.
And we're seeing so many diseases on the rise because of the dis-ease emotionally in somebody. And this
Mhm.
stigma that, you know, or mentally, you're a nutter, you know, you're a crazy one. No, we're all absolutely crazy. And it's a prerequisite to live here on earth is to be a little crazy
Well,
because that's how we
it's
survive.
part of human suffering. I mean, it's the
Exactly.
human experience. Mhm.
But that needs to be just thrown away, that you're less than. It
Mhm.
just means you are out of balance and things have happened to you you can't cope with, you can't navigate through, you can't release and
Right.
move on from. And
Mhm.
when you've got, you know, a 2-year global pandemic, and
Mhm.
then you've got all the division, because for a while there, the world came together in harmony. It was beautiful. People
Mhm.
went in and started looking at their lives, what was more important. You know, it was that beautiful gift of a pause to reflect and
Mhm.
review their lives. And then, of course, as human nature went out, you went out with the divide and the hate and the against and and that
Mhm.
puts so much stress on everybody. And
Mhm.
we're already stressful enough. We don't need any added thank you. So
Right.
I would
Mhm.
love to see skills in school,
Oh
right
my
from the
goodness.
word go, in kindergarten, you know, at home with the parents, of how just to take 5 and the breath and de-stress. You know, you don't need to take it on. Or if that upset you, why did it? Right?
Mhm.
And then the
Well,
awareness of
yeah.
conversation.
Well, research is showing that those schools that are integrating things like meditation instead of school suspensions are seeing
Yes.
a positive outcome from that. I actually, when I was working towards my license in counseling, I was a school counselor for 2 years, and we were right in there doing character education, talking about different coping skills. I also was in more of a mental health kind of mindset. I don't know if the way I approached it was different. And it's interesting you say the thing about starting as young as schools. I will say, in response to all of the shootings that have happened in America in the schools, I had reached out to a local congressman. Honestly, I can't remember their gender because it was a couple of years ago.
Congressperson.
Yes, let's be gender neutral here. And recommended, why don't we have mental health screenings be part of the physical that kids do? Of course, I didn't hear anything in response, but it was an idea that I thought was important, and maybe it will be at some point. Maybe it'll become a conversation at some point.
I think when less of the emphasis is on the gun rights and on the human rights,
and more on mental health.
More on mental health. We it's like with everything, Western medicine is wonderful. It saves many lives. It's quite incredible, but it's there at the crisis. It's not at the core of it. And we've got to look at what is the core, what's causing the crisis.
Exactly.
Right? And yes, we life and death with the crisis. Yes, deal with that. But let's turn the clock back. Let's look at what the core is, because the core is what's led to this crisis. And I have a whole series. I have another genre called Raising Our Gifted Children, but I have a series on the forgotten children, which is going to be a 3-book collaborative book of people like yourself contributing a chapter on the raising of our children, on what we are needing to do. Because we have, the dysfunction of adult society stems from our childhood.
Right.
And we've put so much emphasis on taking children away from parents instead of helping the parents be parents, of energizing their economic situation, of making them feel safe in their environment, of giving them hope that there is more than the gang selling drugs on the corner and gang shooting, and that guns are not the answer. Love is the answer, and corny as it is, it's achievable, right? Through every aspect of your life. And if we don't change the narrative, we're going to end up with the same problem over and over again, which is definition of madness. So I think that, that there has to be a rise up from people like yourself, not just one voice. There has to be a chorus. And that we know at the present moment with Congress as it is, it wouldn't pass a fart if it benefited the Democrats. I'm sorry, they just wouldn't. And so we have to appeal. And what I'm noticing, it's the individual organizations, individual people that have stepped up and opened up organizations.
Levels.
I interview a lot of veterans, and they said, what was lacking for them when they came back in the therapy, they formed the organizations to support other veterans, which just goes way beyond just supporting the veterans, because they understood what they needed. And so
run for Congress. No, I'm just kidding.
Make a difference, please.
I wonder if they've ever had a mental health clinician on the no,
oh my God, you'll be so overworked with trying to deal with the mental situation going on. I'll ego. Could you even chisel through the ego and the insecurity there and the narcissism? And basically, as crippling as Congress has become, is the way society has become, because we're not paying attention to mental health. And let us not put blame on the parents who don't know better, but instead educate, guide, and support. Right? They're going to raise. My mother always said, you raised your children the way you wanted to be raised. Right? She's from the era of, she literally got caned at the age of 3 from wanting a hug from her mother. Right. Wow. So there wasn't, I was a very sickly child, so in bed a great deal. I'd get my breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And she, when I had an asthma attack, she was there. Other than that, I was on my own. There wasn't TV or iPad or even a radio at that time. Right. So it's, but that was, you're being cared for, because that was what she knew. As we know better, we need to do better. And I wish I knew. Well, that's why the book is important, because when we know ahead of time, we now can make better decisions. And if we don't know, we can inquire.
Yes, absolutely. And I hope that that's exactly what we're hoping happens, is because knowledge is power and
It is.
psychoeducation is power. And the more power you have, the less your abuser can have, and the less the people that try to hurt you can have.
Yes. The
Mhm.
more empowered you are, the more you are an inspiration to someone else, which
Exactly.
becomes an invitation for them
Exactly.
to place value upon themselves, for
Right.
them to step up, into that beautiful higher loving vibration of
Mhm.
appreciation, of gratitude for who they are and what they contribute, because we're all here to be contributors. We're all here
Mhm.
to be of service to one another.
Mhm.
And we see the programs that celebrate dysfunction, your housewife shows and all of those type of shows that, people lashing out each other painfully is
Mhm.
meant to be sensational TV. It is
Right.
a detriment to us. It really
Mhm.
is a detriment to us. And I think that what we put out there in the world is psychologically being received. Have you seen there's two movies I'm going to recommend. One is Fallout. I don't know if you've seen that.
No, I'll have to write that down.
No, I'll tell you why it's really important for you as a psychotherapist, because it's about a shooting in a school and the impact it had on the various students.
Oh,
And it's
wow.
and it's geared around just a couple of the students.
Mhm.
Some I'm going to fight back, becoming activists, and the
Mhm.
other one kind of feeling really vulnerable. Very, very well done. Very well done. And then the other one
This
is
is a true story.
yeah, I don't know, but probably very much based on a true story. I mean,
Mhm. Mhm.
um, you just wonder what do these poor kids go through afterwards, because they never feel safe again, right? That's the
Right.
problem.
Mhm.
The other one is actually the making of Sesame Street. And
Oh,
why,
interesting.
very interesting. It's 50 odd years on, and the
Mhm.
making of how Sesame Street came about, which
Mhm.
was through, psychotherapists, psychologists on
Mhm.
our children were going home, waiting for their parents to come home, and they were watching beer ads and cigarette ads.
Oh my
And so
goodness.
they said, we've got to put out a program that's educational, but also as stimulating. And this is how it's
Um,
fascinating how Sesame
that's so
Street
neat.
came
Yeah,
about.
I'll have to check
So
that out.
I
I used
think
to
you,
love Sesame Street.
yes, I know. And but see how it came about and all the wonderful different ideas and how it evolved and what it means, what it's meant to,
Mhm.
5 decades of generations with
Right.
much more to come. But it was
Mhm.
the goal behind it has succeeded. But,
Mhm.
it was talking about the unity, everybody that lives on the street, the education,
Oh, that's true.
right?
Mhm.
And, the education, even
Mhm.
talking about death and talking about things that happen in life. And it became that wonderful, um, entertaining, but informational, inclusive show
Mhm.
that was speaking to our children.
Right.
So two highly recommend. I think that you'll get a takeaway from both of them.
Oh, thank you. I love recommendations for movies. I'll definitely
I,
check them
I
out.
I mean, I love, I watch things like The Walking Dead and this and that, because for me it's always fascinating of
Mhm.
what will push people to the limit. What will they do?
Mm.
Will they lose themselves? Will they find themselves? What
Mhm.
extent will they go to survive? And
Yeah.
I think that's quite metaphoric for life. How far will we go?
Right.
What are we willing to give up of ourselves? What are we, what level is I won't cross that boundary? And I
Mhm.
think it's a good question to ask ourselves.
I would agree. And that's one of the things too with taking those steps, those leaps of faith, is you don't know until you try. You
Right?
really don't know.
No.
And when people can get into a feedback loop where they're creating the narrative of what's going to happen without actually trying,
Hmm.
a lot of times we make the outcomes a whole lot more negative than they actually are.
Yes.
And that's actually one thing I do try with people who are individuals who are trying to leave an abuser or try to leave a relationship that's not serving them, is let's do a visual of what it feels like or what would be the best case scenario. Like I had one woman kind of walk mentally through her own apartment that she has on her own and open the window and get her art supplies out and do her daily devotions and kind of like get the taste and the feel of what would the positive alternative be. So I
I
remember
do that all the time.
good.
I do movie scenarios all the time,
Mhm, mhm,
um,
mhm,
and it's because I feel that is the vibrational information of how I want to feel. It's
mhm.
no, you can't manifest, I want this and I want that. The universe doesn't work on that. The universe works on the energy of how you want to feel in that. So if you give them a
Right.
scenario of this will make me feel this will make me feel that, And
Right.
forget about revenge, folks. That doesn't benefit anyone. But, that feeling, the universe now knows how to give you that vibration to manifest that happening. But,
Absolutely.
what we seed, what we water, and what we nurture is what will grow. So I think we have to be very mindful. And I think very often we don't realize we're feeding the wrong seeds because we're so entrenched in that. And we do need someone like yourself who's going to shift us into a different perspective. And you know why your garden isn't growing anything other than weeds?
There's seeing a bit of a theme here.
It's time to rethink what we plant and what we nurture. And that, we're that seed that we need to water and nurture, which is really, really important.
Agreed. And it is, I think, when someone feels that they are, how do I put it? When they feel that they are a bad seed, like if that's been ingrained in their mind through past relationships, often through parental relationships or other experiences, I sometimes challenge people to try things even if they don't feel like it's true to them quite yet.
Yes.
Like it's that whole fake it till you become it type of thing. Do the thing, try the things, continue. You have to remember that the way that we think and feel happened over decades for some people. Like those synapses get formed and they mold together, and they're going to be, what we do repeat repetitively becomes important to us.
Right.
To confirm the record. So
yeah. And our memories of our trauma or memories of anything that in our life that has caused a disease is very much in our cellular tissue. And we have got to be willing to go deep and multiple layers, and you don't do it all at once. You have one layer clear and then something pops up. No, it doesn't mean you've gone back there. It just means there's another layer you need to release along the way, but be willing to release it, right?
Probably why I'm in therapy so long with people.
Well, yeah, I mean, it isn't kind of, oh, thanks, doc, I'm just going to go out and do this now. And, no, you've got to be willing to take the journey. You are, you're the person alongside this person on the journey, like the coach at the Olympics. They're not the ones skiing down the jump. They're the ones that are helping the skier be the best they can, right?
Absolutely. Giving them that reflection of how they're doing.
Yes, because they've still got to do the work.
Right.
You're just showing them the path and giving them the tools they need to apply.
Good reference, since the Olympics are on right now.
Yeah. Yes, I've been watching it and going, oh my God, how high was that? How fast was that? It's like
my funniest thing recently, I was on the elliptical and someone is doing the cross country skiing on the Olympics. I'm like, I'm just like him.
Exactly. And for a moment you can be.
Look at me go. Look at me go on this little elliptical.
Yes, and if you reach your goal that day, there's your gold.
There right? I was.
And it's okay to give ourselves a gold now and again, right? Yeah. It's okay. You are worthy. You are worthy. Now you have a little one. I'm assuming a baby.
A baby, and so I have a 1-year-old and a 6-year-old.
Oh my goodness, yes, I remember those days. I have an 11-month-old grandson, and it's a totally different reflection with a grandchild as it is with a child, because my kids are all in their 30s. When you have a child, it's like you're responsible for this child day in and day out, right? And when it's a grandchild, I can go in and smother and devour and everything else, and I'm not there day in and day out. It is a different feeling, beautiful feeling. Both are beautiful feelings, just different. But there is, in today's world, one of the problems we're seeing is a lot of people giving the apparatuses, the phone, the everything else to the child, which is not only going to be bad for their brain development, but it also, one of the things we're seeing very lacking is that lack of communication, of interaction. And there is kind of a fear that generation is going to be so disconnected. And, they become our rulers and leaders in the future. And again, I think going back to that education, in the schools, in the homes, is be aware of, again, what you're seeding and what you're watering, and is it going to be beneficial for the harvest? So.
Right. And so, I mean, that also can translate into that whole conversation earlier about whether or not narcissists are created.
Right. Yes. Yes, exactly.
Mhm.
Again, if you know what you know now, then, and with your book, it is that wonderful guide of, the, I'm sure that the first part people can relate to on some level or other, the trauma that they're going through or the relationships they're going through, um, and know how it feels. But then going through the other side of it, of how you can feel and how you can thrive. It isn't just a question of just buy the book and now you know everything, or you download an app and that's it, or take
Right.
a pill. No, it is about the willingness to go through the process. And if you're
Mhm.
willing to go through the process, you can reach that thrival.
Absolutely. It is a journey. I mean, it's not going to be cut and dry.
No.
And we explore that as well. We explore that through my co-author's story as
Mm-hmm.
well. How she had these kind of markers, if you will, that she was believing were going to be the sign that she was ready to be done with
Yes.
all the feelings she had. And it's not always that. It's time and offering yourself compassion and patience. And even you can go 10, 20 years post relationship and
Mm-hmm.
something can come up, whether it
Mm-hmm.
be a wedding, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
which can throw you back into having to interact with that person. And you have to just come back to your skills and your
Yes.
strength and the things that you know about you.
Yeah.
So it is a journey. The trauma and thriving and honestly just living. None of it's
Yes.
cut and dry. And
No.
when we want it to be so neatly packaged, I think is when we get more frustrated.
Right. Yeah. It's going with a flow that's going in the right direction, but get into that
Yes.
flow. Right.
Yes,
Have the right
absolutely.
tools and skills in your backpack on your journey. So, how does your program work, or how does your practice work? In what way do you serve your people?
So there's a group of 10 of us. We see all different types of populations. I specifically see adults, mainly trauma, substance abuse, some eating disorders, and it's all pretty much linked back to trauma.
Mhm.
I've been working in the field for 18 years and I've just kind of been channeling closer and closer to what felt true to me. Each one of us is so uniquely different, though, in what we offer.
Mhm.
I personally also offer a meditation program on Insight Timer, and I'll be doing some live teaching classes through them in the spring. In addition to that, my podcast or my blog on ameliakelley.com, I offer ongoing mental health articles for individuals to read to get kind of a little bit of an insight into things that they can focus on a weekly basis. But as far as how I work, that is such a variety of answers. I am more of a long-term therapist. I do tend to have a client for a long period of time because I do work with more highly sensitive folks who want to dig a bit deeper into topics as opposed to just kind of coming in for solution focused work.
Right.
A lot of what I do centers around the body because I'm a yoga teacher as well
Mm.
and an art therapist. So we'll
Mm.
use art, we'll use yoga, we use EMDR, we use our walking trail nearby, whatever I need to do to help ground the person, some somatic work, journaling. I mean, really anything. Today I set up a client who's going to be doing TMS, which is a magnetic field treatment
Mhm.
for resistant depression. So it's pretty much anything I can think of inside or outside the box, I will tap into with
Good.
people.
I'm glad you have no box.
No box.
That's very, very important. And that means you've got all of these wonderful tools that you can use as to what the client needs. And
Yes,
it is not just,
absolutely.
one program, there's hope it fits. You've got other tools that you can use in any situation, which, with some people, this works really well, this doesn't. All right. So,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
which is
It's
good to know.
very much tailored to each individual.
And also, art therapy. Whoa, there's so much in that.
I know. I love it.
Yeah.
It's the way I even became an art therapist was so bizarre too, because I was actually I was going to work at MTV in the art department. I had an internship there in college and then 9/11 happened.
Mm.
And I'm from New York and I don't live in New York City, but I have family there. And I remember watching a documentary maybe a month or two later about some art therapists who had been working with children who had lost
Mm.
parents at the towers. And it was this light bulb moment. I
Yeah.
was like, oh my gosh, I'm not supposed to be a graphic artist. I'm supposed to be an art therapist.
Yes.
And so I won't get into the whole story of how I basically pushed my way into the program, but I got it. And here I am. But yeah, it's just amazing how, those little moments, if you listen to them,
Yes.
you'll find your right path.
Yeah. Pay attention to the signs. They're always there. They're tap on the shoulder. You don't want the cosmic 2x4.
Absolutely.
Right. And, art therapy is wonderful. I want my daughter to go that way. She's a social worker and she's a wonderful abstract artist who really captures the moment. And but she's got the 10-month-old, and so, right now.
Right. I did not have the baby when I was in high school.
And she said, oh, I've got to follow my career. I said, no, your career is your kid right now and you want to have another one. So let motherhood be your career right now. And then you can dabble into everything as experience and then focus in on what you want to do later because it will become more relevant then. And, motherhood is a career, folks. It is. So I'm very glad you incorporate all of that because we don't want the one size fits all. We don't want tell me about your mother, whereas it used to be in my day. And that, you also can tap into the energy, the spiritual energy of the person and know which way they're going to receive more. And you say you're under an umbrella of other people, which also kind of specialize in different styles.
Right. And I mean, the thing of it is that if you, again, getting into comparisons and expectations, if you have too many expectations of the way we're supposed to go, we're not being mindful, we're not in the moment, and we're not able to actually, see what's really going on. So
the gift of the present is in the now.
Yes, absolutely.
And if you can deal with the now, unravel the now, everything else, it's like once you unravel that particular knot, all sorts of things come loose, right? So everybody, but tell me why this? Why do I do this? Why do I do that? Well, let's just take a breath, come into the moment, and let's see where we're at right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We're not very good at being in the now and centering in the now and taking that breath, are we? It's always like, yeah, but what's next? No, now. Now is where it's important. So your site is?
AmeliaKelley.com.
Can you spell it for the people who are listening?
Yes, I was going to say Kelley's with an EY. So Amelia, so AmeliaKelley. I'm also on Instagram at drAmeliaKelley.com. My private practice, Kelley-counseling.com. You can also find quite a few resources on there. Check out what we're doing. We do offer telehealth. And if you're not needing to use insurance, you can do telehealth cross state lines. But if you are using insurance, you do have to be within the state of North Carolina. But we try to offer lots of resources on there as well, talk about all the treatments that we have. So yeah.
And you work virtually as well as physically?
Yes. And I mean, really, that was something I dabbled a little bit in pre-COVID. Definitely more common now. I have to say, as someone who does use a lot of alternative treatments, I prefer in person if possible. However, there are some wonderful benefits to having that be an option, even so far as if someone can't find childcare and they need to do a telehealth session, or if they're going to be traveling or things like that. I think it can just help with the consistency. So
so there's always a solution. And we can find your book at
everywhere: Amazon, Target, Walmart. So the title again, What I Wish I Knew: Surviving and Thriving After an Abusive Relationship. We also have a Facebook page with the latest news on there, What I Wish I Knew the Book. And we're also on Instagram at What I Wish I Knew the Book.
Excellent. Wonderful. I'm glad you wrote this book, and I'm glad it was from somebody who has gone through the trauma and there's somebody helping them through it, because we see both sides. We see the pain and the anguish, but we see the solution and what can be. And, very often the kind of life we can live, the thrival life, we certainly don't see when we're in the just survival life, trying to get through the next moment, and having that inspiration, which again is the invitation to know that there is a solution. If we're just willing to go through that process, we can get there. And so it's very, very important, because it becomes that illumination for people. So thank you for writing the book.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm so happy that it's out there for people.
And if you know somebody that's going through something, and you maybe don't want to be too direct, but you know it. It's like, I've just read this book. Would you like to read it?
And that brings up an interesting point too. And so, I'm sorry, I got so excited, I kind of interrupted you there. The book can be such a tool for clinicians
yes,
who want to help. Also for people who know someone else who is in an abusive relationship, and you don't know the ins and outs of what they're going through. You don't know how to help them or how to talk to them about it. It can be hugely empowering and helpful for your relationship, and really can teach you, how can I be there for this person?
Yes.
So it's really
right. Well, that's the thing. How do you know what somebody's gone through until you have a reflection of it? And if you feel that you've got somebody that you care about is going through this, I've just read this book and read it. Right. Mm-hmm. And this was talked about, you've got to read it. I'd love to know your opinion. So you're not saying you read it because you need it.
Yes.
You read it because I'd love to have a chat about this.
Yes.
Or even start a book club where everybody's required to read it, and now everybody can come and share, and that where they feel safe to do so, right?
And feel free, people can contact me through my website. I have agreed to be part of a couple book clubs where we can go answer questions, offer some extra support. So we're happy to do that. If anyone listening feels like that might be helpful for maybe a support group they're in, or a group of clinicians learning how to help these folks, we're happy to be of service in any way.
Excellent. There's always hope, folks, always hope. You don't have to live in the darkness. And I know what it feels like. It feels like a hurricane that you can't get out of. And you don't want to be, oh God, that person's just driven home, because you know they're driving home differently and you know you're in for it. You don't want to live like that. You are far worth more than that. You are love. Be that love that you seek, and let yourself free. And this is a book that can help you on the way. And when you're ready, you can step up and speak to her about helping her, if you're in North Carolina, helping you go even further, because we're not meant to be solo on this journey. We're not meant to be. We're meant to be there for each other. And the reason why some people are ahead of us with this knowledge is for them to pass it on to you. So it becomes part of your toolkit and helping you on your journey. And as you gather wisdom and knowledge and whatever your skill is, you pass it on to someone else. That is the nature of life. So thank you so much for sharing here today. It's been wonderful. So many wonderful goodies here. I love it.
Thank you. It was very fun. It was nice to talk to you.
Folks, remember, if there's always a solution. I wish I knew what I knew. It's what I know now. I wish I knew what I wish I knew. God, I've got to get my dyslexia saying it. What I wish I knew. We all have said that somewhere along the line. God, if only I had known that. And this could be a wonderful book for you, even when you think that you're stable and you're okay in life, and you can look at it and go, that was a good reminder. Because we get complacent, and it's a good reminder to make sure that it never happens again. So until next time, please place love and value on yourself. You are awesome. You are worth it. We are here for you. Until next time, bye for now. We hope that you enjoyed the show right here on selfdiscoverymedia.com. Please tune in to our selfdiscoverymedia.com/shows, and you will see all the other genres that we have from you. Every week on Tuesday, we bring you new shows from illuminating people. If you know someone that should be interviewed, please contact us at info@selfdiscoverymedia.com. Now stay tuned for your next show.